This video is sponsored by Incogni. It's no secret that Christianity is declining in the US. Some think this is a reason to celebrate, others are gravely concerned, others doubt this trend will continue, and still others think that this is a sign that the world is about to end. And hey, with all the practice that doomsday prophets have gotten over the last few thousand years, they're bound to be right this time, right?
There shall in that time be rumours of things going astray. At this time, a friend shall lose his friend's hammer.
Given its steep decline, will Christianity in the US meet its end in the coming century or two? And if so, how would that happen? While I don't think the answer to that question is knowable, I do think the question is interesting enough to speculate about. So here I'll present 3 scenarios for how Christianity could hypothetically become extinct, or at least rare, in the America of the future. At the end, I'll reveal which scenarios I think are more and less likely.
But first, we need healthcare, and that's why you need Incogni, sponsor of this video. What do you think? Will this segue posing as cynicism work? Will the brand be mad? Who knows? No, really. Every year when I renew my health insurance through the official websites, I'm inundated with tons of spam calls, texts, and emails for weeks or even months. That's because way too many websites, including ones that you have to visit to sign up for public services, just don't guard your information very well, and it can end up in the wrong hands. This can result in spam, but it can also allow data brokers to gather your personal information and sell it to people who should not have it without your consent. This includes health insurance companies who can use it to find ways to raise your rates. To avoid this and keep my address off the internet where you weirdos could find it, I use Incogni. This is a service that scours the internet for your personal information and gets it removed for you. You can even track the number of times Incogni has gotten your data out of others' hands. It's easy to use, affordable, and allows you some extra peace of mind. The first 100 people to use the code Skeptic at the link below will get 60% off of Incogni, so click that link in the description and pinned comment to try it out, help out my channel, and protect your data at the same time.
Scenario 1. Secularism overtakes religion. There's a theory popularized in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that as a nation becomes increasingly modern, it inevitably becomes less religious. This is called secularization theory, or if you're less confident in it, the secularization hypothesis. Classical secularization theory of the 19th century pointed to a transition out of agrarian living and into industrialization as a driving force for secularism, while current secularization theory tends to point toward increasing urban living, wealth, education, and the security those things provide as driving forces. Of course, this is a very brief summary, but I will link resources in the description if you'd like to learn more. Advocates of this idea today often point to Northern Europe as a shining example of this phenomenon. It is one of the most urbanized, wealthy, educated, and socially secure places in the world, and it's one of the least religious. America is going in this direction already, some argue. In 2022, Pew Research released an article titled Modeling the Future of Religion in America, which featured several projections of the future religious composition of the country. It didn't set out to support the secularization hypothesis, but some see its projections as support for the idea. Here's me reading the article's explanation of its methods. All the projections start from the current religious composition of the US population, taking account of religious differences by age and sex. Then they factor in birth rates and migration patterns. Most importantly, they incorporate varying rates of religious switching, movement into and out of broad categories of religious identity, to model what the US religious landscape would look like if switching stayed at its recent pace, continued to speed up as it's been doing since the 1990s, or suddenly halted. In one projection, which I find more likely than others, it's assumed that switching rates will continue to accelerate, but will not exceed those we see in Great Britain today. Here, Christians become outnumbered by religiously unaffiliated people by about 2055. In 2070, Christians make up 39% of the population, while the unaffiliated make up 48%. Importantly, Pew also states, of course, it is possible that events outside the study's model, such as war, economic depression, climate crisis, changing immigration patterns, or religious innovations, could reverse current religious switching trends, leading to a revival of Christianity in the United States. But there are no current switching patterns in the US that can be factored into the mathematical models to project such a result. Proponents of the secularization hypothesis could present this data, along with the fact that the US is becoming more educated and urbanized, to predict that America will become mostly non-religious, with Christians making up just a few percentage points of the population in the 22nd century. A counterpoint to this idea is that America is significantly more culturally and ethnically diverse than the Nordic countries and has far fewer social programs, which provide a kind of existential security to the less privileged. So a future America, unlike Nordic countries, may not see its population go from being almost entirely composed of Christians finding community and security through the church to one almost entirely composed of non-religious people finding community and security through highly accessible technological and state resources. It may also be that the secularization hypothesis is just flawed, as some sociologists seem to think today. Plenty, but not all, evidence points to the idea that wealth, education, urban living, and existential security negates religiosity for everyone. Scenario 2. Other religions overtake Christianity. Post 9/11, many Americans became very concerned about the global influence of Islam, especially because, for many, their only exposure to the faith was that of radical Islamic groups committing acts of violence. A significant number of both secular and religious people grew anxious about immigration, fearing that it allowed for extremists to infiltrate the US and commit acts of terror. Many Americans became paranoid, and when paranoia arises, conspiracy theories often surge in popularity. Certain white Christians claimed that Muslims were trying to replace them, especially in their place of dominance in American politics. This is a version of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory pushed by white supremacist groups like the KKK. As a fundamentalist Christian teen, I was actually taught this in church multiple times, even as my parents took special care to teach me about the importance of fighting racism and bigotry, as those things were sinful. As you might imagine, data on immigration does not suggest that this is even remotely possible, and even regardless of that, this conspiracy theory rests upon the absurd and hateful notion that white Christians are inherently better than or preferable to Muslims or those from non-Christian areas. I highly recommend Mr. Beat's video about this conspiracy theory for those who would like to learn more. It's linked in the cards and description. The Pew Research article we looked at earlier actually modeled what it would look like if all migration to and from the US stopped in 2020, and what we see is the religiously unaffiliated catch up to Christians even faster, and the decline of Christianity stay about the same, which suggests, as the article says, continuation of the current migration patterns would have a relatively small long-term impact on the size of the Christian population. Additionally, Christians still make up a majority of immigrants to the US. Although, immigrants are adding substantially to the population that identifies with other religions, which is why if migration stopped, other faiths in the US would grow much less. Still, I should point out, other religions are only projected to make up 13% of the US population by 2070, which doesn't look anything like other religions overtaking Christianity through immigration. For Christianity to be overtaken by other faiths, we'd either need to see an absolutely massive influx of non-Christian immigrants and/or a similarly massive number of Americans, both Christians and the unaffiliated, convert to other faiths. Today, people raised unaffiliated are only 2 or 3% more likely to convert to another religion than those raised Christian. So there'd have to be quite a change in current trends for anything but the unaffiliated to overtake Christianity. This is supposed to be a speculative futurism video though, so let's do some extreme speculation about a scenario where this actually happens. Within the next century, shifts in the Earth's climate create unlivable conditions in some of the planet's major population centers, like Jakarta, Indonesia, Delhi, India, and Lagos, Nigeria. Huge numbers of Muslim and Hindu immigrants seek refuge in the US's less at-risk regions of the Rocky Mountains and Great Lakes. For decades, religious non-affiliation has been rising as Christianity shrinks, but with increasing influence from other religious traditions, existential threats from climate-related disasters, political unrest, and a perception of American Christianity as a climate change denialist ideology, Americans begin to seek comfort and community in other faiths. Islam and Hinduism are most popular, but pagan and folk traditions like Wicca, Reconstructionist paganism, Satanism, and West African spiritualism grow as well. The US becomes more religiously diverse than ever before as Christianity shrinks. That's my best guess. I can't say how likely any of that is, but at least I tried. Scenario 3. The Antichrist battles God and wins. No, I'm just kidding. That's probably not going to happen. Right? Scenario 3. Christianity transforms. Sociologists who study the relationship of religion and politics have popularized the term civil religion. This is a way of thinking about religion that imagines the spheres of religion and politics as distinct, but still overlapping. It is not the less popular liberal secularism, where religion and politics are totally separate, or the growing but still less popular religious nationalism, where religion and politics are indistinguishable. Civil religion is a tradition which draws on a nation's religious and political history for its sacred symbols, stories, and rituals. American sociologist Philip Gorski describes American civil religion as having two main sources: the covenant theology of the Puritans and the civic republicanism of the Founding Fathers. I'll let the man himself explain these ideas.
What do I mean by covenant theology? Well, many of the original Puritan theologians and preachers imagined the U.S., or at least New England, as a kind of a new Israel. That is, as a sort of a chosen people that had a sacred covenant with God, and that if they remained true to that covenant, God would remain bound to them and would bless them, and if they deviated from that covenant, they would be rebuked and punished and scolded. The civic republican tradition of the Founding Fathers envisioned the United States more as a new Athens, if you will. And their fundamental notion was that the success of the American experiment in democracy and self-governance required not just good institutions, but required also a virtuous citizenry. And what they understood by virtue was really two things. One, sort of a willingness to take bold action on behalf of the community, but also a kind of cultivation of self-restraint and self-discipline. They saw these as really sort of two sides of the same coin.
American civil religious tradition could be said to hold founding documents like the Constitution and Declaration of Independence as sacred. Many Americans, especially American Christians, do see them as divinely inspired writings, and even those who don't still typically uphold them as something above other documents, virtuous to honor and offensive to violate. The same could be said for practices like voting, court procedure, and even certain types of political activism. For people who claim a religious affiliation, these things might be explicitly framed theologically, with ideas like God gave us free will and free speech. But even the religiously unaffiliated might uphold similar sacred things using a slightly different framing. Free speech is an inalienable right. By the way, Religion for Breakfast has a whole series about American civil religion, which I've linked in the description. All of this to say, American Christianity, in its integration with American civil religion, is already distinct from any other form of Christianity, and major political events in the future will almost definitely see it take on new or different sacred objects, stories, and rituals. Just as the political effects of World War II influenced American Christianity to sacralize the nuclear family above other forms of kinship, even when Christianity had millennia-long history of sacralizing celibacy, spiritual kinship, and multi-generational households, future events could inspire new values in American Christianity. If we're to speculate about how American Christianity could change, we must decide what major political events we think are most likely to happen. Something I think will have an impact is the political allyship of conservative Christians and Muslims on social issues. Historically, the Christian right and Muslims have been political foes in the US, but that's changing. Perhaps as they continue to band together against progressivism, American Christian doctrine will adapt. They may come to see Muslims as spiritual family, people who righteously serve the same God, just a bit differently. Plenty of Muslims already believe this about Christians, by the way. As you've probably gathered, I think climate change will be massively influential in the next century, so I could see Christianity adopting environmentalism into its theology and climate activism into its practice. That would be a significant change from the American evangelical attitude on climate change today. With changes like these piling up over time, would that make future Christianity a different faith? Would its dominance over current forms of Christianity mean that Christianity as we now know it would be at its end? I imagine many conservative American Christians would say yes. Just as many first-century Christians would probably describe today's American Christianity as a different faith as well. Okay, so which of these scenarios do I think is most likely? If I had to rank them separately, I would put Christianity transforms first, slow decline into secularism second, and other religions overtake Christianity third. But even considering these as totally separate possibilities is overly simplistic in my mind. Parts of all of these scenarios are likely to happen. American Christianity will probably continue to change as it's always done. It will probably shrink as secularism rises, and the growth of other religions in the US through immigration will probably see more Americans convert to other faiths. The big question here is, how uncommon will Christianity become? To which I have a firm and definite answer. I don't know. No one knows. If you think you know, you probably don't know. It's hard for me to imagine Christianity dropping below 20 or 30% in the US even a century from now, but that's just a hunch. This is obviously so complicated that there's no way anyone can have any real certainty about it. Still, I hope this has been an entertaining, if not educational, video for you. But what do you think about Christianity's decline in America? What scenario is most likely? Was there anything that I missed? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I've been Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic. Special thanks to my patrons for their constant love and support. If you want to hear more from me, then subscribe. As always, if you are an apostate in need, there are resources linked in the description to help you find community and mental health support. Remember to be kind to others in the comments, and until next time, stay skeptical. Also remember to click that link in the description and pinned comment to try out Incogni.